9. The Great Escape. "Hi there, Miller." Ralph Deacon, with an extravagant smile, inserted himself between Rudy and Mike at the breakfast table the next morning. "How goes it with you?" Rudy raised expressionless eyes to the Cabin 3 counselor, then turned back to his breakfast. "Say," began Ralph, undaunted, as if a brilliant idea had suddenly occurred to him. "I'm making up an Algonquian Island all-star baseball team. In a couple of days, the Spruce Valley team is coming here to play us. How would you like to be our pitcher?" Rudy began methodically peeling an orange. "I don't play baseball," he said quietly. "Sure you do," cried Ralph. "You're great at baseball." "I don't play it," said Rudy, even more quietly. "All he plays is chess," sneered Harold Green. "Shut up, Green," came from Chip at the head of the table. Ralph's face brightened. "Chess, eh? I'm a pretty fair chess player myself. I'll make you a deal. Meet me at 4 this afternoon in my room in Cabin 3. We'll have a game of chess. If I win, you play on my baseball team." Rudy cocked his head, interested. "And if I win?" "Well," said Ralph, "name it." "I want to go home," said Rudy. "Miller!" exclaimed Chip warningly. "All right," said Rudy. "If I can't go home, then send him home." He pointed to Harold Green. "Nobody's going home," said Chip. "Ask for something realistic." "How about making me camp director for a day?" suggested Rudy. Ralph walked over to Chip and whispered, "What do you say?" "Are you crazy?" exploded Chip. "You can't make Miller camp director for 5 minutes. He'll sink the island." "Don't be silly," whispered Ralph. "Schools these days are always coming out with principal for a day contests, and small towns let kids play mayor for a day. It's only a game. It won't mean anything. And Mr. Warden will be gone all day tomorrow. He doesn't even have to know about it." "But I know Miller," Chip insisted hoarsely. "His first official act will be to send himself home." "We'll stipulate that nobody's allowed to go home," argued Ralph. "Besides, there's no way he can beat me at chess. I'm a Class A player with an 1800 rating. And what about my baseball team? Spruce Valley were last year's champions. They'll murder us if I don't have Miller. Come on, Chip. I'll clear it with Frank." Chip sighed. "If Frank gives permission, then it's okay with me." Ralph rushed across the mess hall and began whispering excitedly to the head counselor. After a heated discussion, Frank approached table 13. "All right, Miller," he said, "the deal's on. But if you win, your term of office lasts only for tomorrow, after Mr. Warden leaves for the mainland. During that time, you can't send yourself or anybody else home, and you're not allowed to damage camp property. No trenches, no fires, no bombs. Understood?" "Agreed," said Rudy. "Good," said Ralph. 4 o'clock. He was jubilant. Frank pulled Ralph aside. "If you lose," he intoned warningly. Chip marched up to the door of the Arts and Crafts building and ushered Rudy and Mike inside. "Here they are, Pierre," he said meaningfully. "They'll be here until lunch. Bring them to the mess hall at noon." He leaned over to Pierre and whispered, "And don't let them out of your sight for 1 second until then." Pierre grinned. "Don't worry," he promised. "They'll get busy on a project and it'll be noon before you know it. I hope." Chip turned to Rudy. "I'll see you and Webster at lunch." He jogged off toward the soccer field. "Well," said Pierre genially, "what have you got planned for today? Another salté?" "I don't think so," said Rudy. "Our last one wasn't really appreciated." "Why don't you do some more woodworking?" suggested Pierre. "You could make nice tie racks for your dads." Rudy shrugged affably. Sounds okay. Would you please go and get us the materials? Pierre started off in the direction of the equipment storage room, then stopped short and chuckled inwardly. Come along with me, he invited amiably. Oh, no thanks, said Rudy. We'll wait here. Oh, I insist, said Pierre firmly. He was no longer smiling. Rudy and Mike exchanged a knowing glance and meekly went along with Pierre to the materials room. Each selected some wood and a design sheet and sat down at the drawing table to plan his project. Keeping one watchful eye on Rudy and Mike, Pierre walked over to help some other boys who were doing leather work. I feel like a prisoner, whispered Mike angrily. It looks like the clones are on us to stay. Chip delivers us here. Pierre has to escort us back to the mess hall. We aren't going to be allowed to go anywhere without some clone on our necks. Well, that's to be expected, Rudy shrugged, sketching a design for his tie rack. After all, we did try to escape several times yesterday. And this is Camp Algonquian Island. Yes, I know, interrupted Mike sourly. Elias wouldn't have liked people escaping. But Rudy, don't you see we're worse off than before? We won't be able to breathe without a clone around to supervise it. Rudy's eyes gleamed. But clones are human, in a vague sort of way. And when Pierre goes to the wash station or something, he won't be able to take us with him. That's when we make our move. What move? Asked Mike suspiciously. Our move to get off this miserable rock, replied Rudy. I don't know about you, but I'm still planning to go home. What about your chess game with Ralph? Rudy shrugged indifferently. Ralph will get over his disappointment. Life goes on. I'm going to be long gone by 4 o'clock. Wishful thinking, said Mike. We'd still have to take a boat, and that's impossible. We promised not to, and there's no getting around it this time. On the contrary, said Rudy. Somewhere at the other side of this island, there's a boat, our sailboat. We wouldn't be taking it. It's already been taken. Mike held his head. How do you know it's still there? Simple. If it were adrift, someone would have found it. It has to be beached on the island, possibly near where we landed that morning. Yeah, said Mike sarcastically. We get in it and we sail away, and Pierre sounds the alarm. Then every clone in the place comes after us in the power boats. They'd overtake us in half a second. But they don't know about our sailboat, Rudy explained patiently. So they won't think to look on the other side of the island. They'll be waiting for us to make a break for the boats at the dock. Meanwhile, we just slip out the back way. But what if Chip or someone sees us out of arts and crafts? Mike protested. All we have to do is run to the woods, said Rudy. Then they'll never find us. He looked long and hard at Mike, interrupting his nervous expression. If you've got any thinking to do, do it now, because as soon as Pierre goes off somewhere, I'm leaving. I'm going too, said Mike quickly. Pierre walked over to inspect their drawings. How are things coming along here? Great, said Rudy enthusiastically. He added something to his diagram. Do you think I could attach a dowel here and countersink a screw on the other side to keep it steady? It's a good idea, nodded Pierre. And what about the wood? Added Rudy. Do you think this piece would stain a nice dark walnut? I want it to match my folks' bedroom furniture. Pierre nodded again. If you sand it properly. What about yours, Webster? I'm gonna do mine just like his, stammered Mike nervously. That figures, said Pierre with a crooked smile. Pierre walked back to help the leather workers. Well, who would have thought it? Every counselor in the camp was worrying about how to control Miller, and here he was, happy as a lark, building a tie rack. He was good at woodworking, too, if the design meant anything. The kid just didn't like sports, that's all. but if they kept his hands and mind busy, he wouldn't be any trouble at all. In the distance, he heard the sharp horn of the mailboat. The plans should be here, the ones he'd ordered from U-Build Crafts. There were all sorts of new woodworking ideas, and he was anxious to see them. He glanced around the room. All heads were down, and all hands were busy. There was no point in waiting until lunch to see what the mailboat had brought. "I'll be right back," he said to the boys, and added meaningfully, "Right back." He dashed off in the direction of Mr. Warden's cottage, where the mail was taken to the camp office to be sorted. Like a ferret, Rudy stuck his head out of the arts and crafts doorway and looked around. "Now," he said softly, and took off for the woods. Breathing a silent prayer, Mike ran after him. The two boys made it to the shade of the trees and kept on running. The beaver was industriously gnawing at the base of a sapling which he planned to add to his dam. He was satisfied with himself. The dam was nearing completion. There had been no rain for a while, and his instinct told him he had several dry days before a good one would come along to swell the creek and test his dam. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble beneath him. He looked up. 2 humans were thundering through the woods directly toward him. Terrified, he scurried into the underbrush and watched with frightened eyes as the 2 stampeded by. One of them crashed headlong into the sapling he had been working on and knocked it down. The human went sprawling. "Are you all right?" asked Rudy, hauling Mike up off the ground. Mike nodded breathlessly. "Let's keep going. We don't know where to find that boat." "Don't worry," said Rudy. "I've got a pretty good sense of direction." "Oh, the orienteering champion too?" Rudy glared at him. "Come on, and look where you're going this time." "What do you mean you just went out to get the mail?" Chip shouted at Pierre. "I thought I told you not to leave them alone." "But they were busy. They were enjoying it." Pierre defended himself half-heartedly. "I told you about Miller." "I told you!" yelled Chip. Okay, we have to stay calm." He looked around desperately. Frank! He tore off in the direction of the baseball diamond, where the head counselor was acting as scorekeeper. Pierre was right behind him. "What is it this time?" asked Frank. "Miller!" panted Chip. "Miller's gone. He and Webster escaped from arts and crafts." Frank blew 2 long blasts on his whistle to call the counselors together. They converged from all directions, from the dock, the swimming area, the obstacle course, the track, the soccer field, and several of the buildings. They all crowded around Frank. "Okay, listen, all of you. Miller and his pal have disappeared. I want the dock sealed off and the entire compound searched. Anybody who finds them or spots them, give 3 sharp blasts on the whistle. From now on, that's the Miller alarm. Now, scramble." He turned to Chip. "Don't worry, Chip. They can't get far without a boat." "Ah, here it is," said Rudy with satisfaction. "I knew it would be around here somewhere." Aside from a few scrapes, the small craft was in perfect condition. It was keeled over among the bulrushes and beached in some gravelly sand. Rudy and Mike heaved it upright and pushed it into the water. "Hop in," Rudy invited. "You hang on to the sail. I'll steer." They boarded, and the little sailboat began to move slowly toward open water. "They'll see us when we get round to the campsite of the island," agonized Mike. "They shouldn't," said Rudy. "We'll make for a part of the mainland farther south than their landing dock, at the very edge of the camp view. The clones will be watching the camp, not the water. We shouldn't have any trouble." "Famous last words," muttered Mike. "Stop complaining and hang on to that sail. It's going to take us quite a while to get to the mainland." Chip looked around the compound in despair. "It's been more than half an hour, Frank. Where can they be?" "Some of the guys are looking in the woods," said Frank. Miller and his pal are probably just hiding out so they can grab a boat tonight when we're asleep. We'll find them." "You don't suppose they'd try to swim to the mainland?" asked Chip anxiously. "Miller could probably do it, you know, there and back." "Let's hope not," said Frank grimly, "because I doubt if Webster could. Anyway, I don't think we have to worry about that. I don't think Miller is that stupid."
"What if they get hurt or lost?" asked Chip nervously. "They're only kids."
"Don't worry," soothed Frank. "It's not your fault."
"I don't care whose fault it is," exploded Chip. "They could get hurt." Suddenly, the air was shattered by 3 short whistle blasts. "The dock!" exclaimed Chip. He and Frank tore off toward the waterfront. Other counselors were also running in the direction of the alarm. Dave, the swimming coach, was standing on the dock, gazing out over the lake through high-powered binoculars. "A sailboat," he said, handing the binoculars to Frank. "Way out there, almost beyond our view. A little farther south and we wouldn't be able to see it at all. It looks like ours, the one that's missing, and there's 2 people in it." "Miller!" shouted Chip, grabbing the field glasses and almost removing Frank's nose in the process. "You come back here!"
"The boats," ordered Frank, rubbing his nose gingerly. "Let's get after them." He and Chip jumped into a speedboat and roared off. 6 counselors leaped into the main launch and followed. 4 more boats, each carrying 2 counselors, joined the chase. Rudy leaned back and tapped the tiller with great satisfaction.
10 more minutes should have us on the mainland."
Mike grinned happily.
"It looks as if we're going to make it this time."
Rudy nodded his agreement.
"And so we bid an unfond farewell to exotic Alcatraz Island."
He turned toward Algonquian.
"Oh, maybe not."
"What? What?" Mike stared in horror. From the island, a wall of white water was starting out in their direction.
"Boats!"
he squeaked.
"Man the oars," said Rudy calmly.
"Oars?" squealed Mike hysterically. "They've got power boats."
"Yes, but we've got a head start."
Rudy grabbed an oar and began to paddle on one side of the boat.
"Now stroke."
Mike took the other oar and worked it madly.
"We're doomed." "We are if we go around in circles," said Rudy. "Paddle on the stroke. Stroke, stroke, stroke."
With their paddling assisting the sail, the small boat reached the mainland very quickly. By now the boys could hear the sound of the Algonquian Island Armada coming after them. They could even see Chip in the lead boat, standing up and shaking his fist. They leaped out of their sailboat and scrambled up the grassy bank.
"What are we going to do? What are we going to do?"
gibbered Mike.
"I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm going to run," replied Rudy.
He took off through the woods.
"Wait for me!"
shouted Mike, running after him.
"They're getting away! They're getting away!" howled Chip.
"Calm down," snapped Frank. "We'll be landing in a minute. They can't get far."
"Can't you make this thing go any faster?"
"No, I can't. Now sit down and shut up." The 6 boats soon landed, and Frank addressed the counselors. "All right, you guys. They went that way." He pointed up the bank where Rudy and Mike had disappeared. "They'll probably come to that town, Snow Hill. Let's move." Chip had already dashed up the bank and out of sight.
"A town," said Rudy. "Let's find a bus station."
"What about a telephone?" asked Mike, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "I thought the plan was to find a telephone and call our folks."
"No time. The clones can't be far behind us. We've got to keep moving."
"Where's the bus station, then?"
"It's got to be on this street," Rudy pointed out. "There are no other streets. Look, there's a convenience store. I'll go in and ask directions. You stay here and keep watch in the doorway."
"Me? Why me?" squealed Mike. Rudy sighed. Would you like to ask for directions and I'll wait outside?
No way.
Well, then. Rudy opened the door of the small shop, stepped inside, made a fast turn, and was outside like a shot, pulling Mike down the street.
That was quick, said Mike. Are we running to catch a bus?
Hardly, said Rudy mildly. I couldn't go into the store. Chip was there.
Oh, no,
moaned Mike.
Did he see you? Miller!
Howled a familiar voice behind them. He saw me, confirmed Rudy. Quick, down this alley. He pushed Mike ahead of him into the alley and headlong into Ralph Deacon, bowling him over. Rudy and Mike pulled away and took off in another direction. Ralph, temporarily winded, sat up and blew 3 short blasts on his whistle. Rudy and Mike pounded down the middle of the road as counselors began to appear from all corners of Snow Hill.
We're surrounded,
Mike panted hysterically. Run for the lumber yard, said Rudy calmly, pointing to a wide gate at the end of the street. They made for the lumber yard, all 16 counselors in hot pursuit. Rudy vaulted over a pile of dressed lumber. Mike scrambled after him.
What good is this going to do? He gasped. Now we're trapped in the yard.
They'll all come in here to look for us, Rudy explained in a whisper. And while they're looking, we'll slip back and get away. We don't have to stay here. There are other towns. They heard Frank's voice calling.
They went in here. Search the place.
They could hear pounding footsteps as the crowd of counselors began to spread out and search between the rows of lumber piled everywhere. Mike gripped Rudy's arm hard enough to cut off the circulation. Frank had appeared to the left of them. The 2 fugitives wheeled to the right. There, in the narrow alleyway made by the piled-up wood, was Chip. They were trapped. Rudy put up his arms in a gesture of surrender. Comrade, he said resignedly. Mike stood trembling. Chip and Frank ran up to them, each blowing 3 sharp whistle blasts to call the others.
Put your hands down, Miller,
said Frank in disgust. Don't be an idiot.
Miller, bawled Chip. This is the end of you.
For today, Rudy agreed.
Did you really think you could get away? Asked Frank angrily.
We almost did, said Rudy. Almost, echoed Mike forlornly.
Shut up, snapped Chip. Just for this, you've got 10 more days' work detail each.
And kitchen duty? Prompted Rudy in mock hope.
You're off kitchen duty, grumbled Chip sourly.
Enough chit-chat, snapped Frank. Let's get back to the boats and watch those 2 birds. Birds? Repeated Rudy, highly insulted. Birds?
Shut up, Miller, growled Chip. March.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Ralph Deacon rubbed his hands together gleefully. Is that Miller ever scared to play me at chess?
Yeah, says who? Muttered Chip savagely.
I figure he must have tried to run away just to avoid playing me, said Ralph. Our chess game, remember? He must have heard about my rating and chickened out.
Forget it, said Chip firmly. No more chess for Miller. That's another one of his punishments.
What? But my all-star baseball team.
Hang your all-star baseball team. It's me that has to deal with Miller, and I say no more chess.
You're missing the point, insisted Ralph. When he loses to me, he'll have to play baseball, right? He won't be able to say we're pressuring him because he agreed to the deal. What could be worse punishment? He hates it. Chip smiled dreamily. In his mind, he had a picture of Miller on the baseball team. It was beautiful. Miller was so miserable. Chip frowned as the mental images changed. There was Miller, winning the chess game. Miller, camp director for a day. Oh, no. No, it could never happen. Ralph was 20 years old and had a high rating, and Miller was just a kid. It was going to be all right. "Checkmate," said Rudy quietly.
"Don't you think I know that?" cried Ralph Deacon, staring at the board incredulously.
Rudy stood up. "Thank you for the game," he said formally. "If you'll excuse me, it's almost dinner time, and right after that I have work detail. 10 more days, you know."
"Mm-hmm,"
muttered Ralph weakly, still staring intently at the board. Miller had utterly destroyed him in less than 20 moves. And tomorrow Miller was going to be camp director. Frank and the guys were going to be mad enough to chew nails. Rudy stepped outside of cabin 3, where a large group of counselors and a few campers were waiting.
"Tough luck, Miller,"
piped Chip.
"This time you bit off more than you could chew."
Rudy frowned at him. "Show some respect, please," he said softly. "Tomorrow you'll be working for me."
"You won?"
shouted Mike.
"He won,"
groaned Chip. "Oh no," thought Frank.